Commission. And as chair, I'm calling this meeting to order. I am participating from my home in Ann Arbor. I want to welcome everybody to the July 12th, 2022 meeting of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission. This virtual meeting is to affect social distancing to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We will conduct this meeting similar to in-person meetings. We're all forgetting what that's like. Commissioners, during roll call, please indicate your current location. During the meeting, please remain on camera just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Also mute your microphone when not speaking. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the two public comment opportunities, please call one of the two following numbers: 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, on the broadcast of the meeting on CTN channel 16 or AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Missy, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
My pleasure, Chair Mirsky. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from Indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you for that reminder. If you would take the roll call, that would be great.
Absolutely. And Commissioners, Chair Mirsky was an excellent model. Just remember to tell me where you're calling in from so I can add that to the notes. Commissioner McComber.
Calling in from my home in Ann Arbor.
Chair Mirsky.
Yes, calling from Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Vice Chair Colvin Garcia.
Present, calling from Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Radina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kerber.
I'm here and calling in from Lakeland, Washington.
It's beautiful. Commissioner Peck.
I'm in Ann Arbor, but I am also a fan of Mount Rainier.
Yes, you are. I love that. Commissioner Juneau.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Smith.
Calling in from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Zillman.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And then absent, I have Commissioner Levin, McCoy, McHaney, and Conan. I'm just going to make sure no one's in the waiting room.
Commissioner McCoy indicated that she is in Washington, D.C. and unable to join us. She informed Missy and me of that in advance. So before we move on, I'd like to recognize two commissioners. First of all, Edie is going to be moving to Washington, D.C. And I wanted to thank you for your service, not only on the commission, but also representing us on the Environmental Commission. And I was wondering if you would share with us who you're going to be rubbing elbows with in Washington, D.C., and if we can call on you when we need your help.
Of course. Well, so I will be continuing in my role with the National Wildlife Federation, just anticipating the general transition and opening of the Capitol and so forth. And my partner also got a job in DC. So that's the impetus. But yeah, hope to stay in touch with everyone. And thank you all for all the great work.
Congratulations. And we welcome a new commissioner today, Alex Zillman. And Alex, why don't you introduce yourself to us, and then we can also go around very briefly in a couple of sentences and introduce ourselves to you.
Yeah, I am a recent graduate from the University of Michigan with a major in public policy, a focus in intersectional justice. And I'm really happy to be here and get involved in making Ann Arbor a more energy efficient place.
Excellent. Where's your hometown?
Oh, it's Bedford, Michigan. It's like 40 minutes southeast.
Yes. Yes. So I'll start. I'm an Ann Arbor native, attended U of M, left for graduate school, moved back in 2015 after retirement, and I've been involved in environmental issues in general since then, including serving on the Energy Commission since 2016. Larry, you want to tell them a bit about yourself? I'll just go through as you appear on the calendar or on the screen.
Yes, I'm Larry Kerber, and I am currently doing solar development, primarily commercial, but also residential. And I'm almost a lifetime resident of the state of Michigan, growing up just north of Ann Arbor and living in Ann Arbor for literally the last, well, since I went to school here in the 70s. So long time.
Councilmember Briggs.
Yes, I represent the 5th Ward, which is on the west side of Ann Arbor, and have been liaison on Energy Commission since we started in 2020. And though I served previously on Energy Commission, maybe in 2007 or something like that. So a couple of stints on the commission.
Commissioner McComber.
I work for a local nonprofit environmental group called the Ecology Center. I've been there for, gosh, over 20 years. And I have, this is the second commission I've served on. I've been on the Energy Commission for a while now, since 2003 or thereabouts. And before that, I was on the Parks Commission for about 6 years. And I've been in Ann Arbor for over 30 years.
Commissioner Juneau, introduce yourself.
Welcome, Alex. My name is Edie, and I'm also a resident of Michigan, lifelong resident. I'm from the Flint area, moved to Ann Arbor for graduate school. I've served on the commission for a year now, and I work for the National Wildlife Federation. So nice to meet you.
Councilmember Redina.
Thanks. I will be very brief because I've had coffee with Alex a number of times to talk about it here. So I will actually just say about Alex that if any of you want to talk to him in depth about issues extending well beyond Energy Commission, he has a ton of great ideas. And so I am excited for him to join this group.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
Hello, my name is Sheree Smith. I am a director with Guidehouse, a consulting firm, and I primarily focus on utility clients and touch a range of topics, including energy efficiency, renewable energy, as well as kind of most recently my focus in the mobility or transportation electrification space. And I am also an Ann Arbor native, left for school and came back and have been back ever since. It's a pleasure to meet you, Alex.
Commissioner Calvin Garcia.
Hi, Alex. It's really nice to meet you and welcome to the commission. I am currently the vice chair of the Energy Commission. I've been on the commission since 2017. I come by way of local advocacy efforts for solar power curriculum in the schools, installation of solar in the schools way back before there's the big installations going in, and also being a business owner, in particular in the area of transportation. So transportation, zero to low emissions transportation, beginning in my biodiesel days back in the early aughts. And then now with EV, electric vehicle charging systems, and really looking at how to help folks who live in multi-unit dwellings, develop solutions for their EV charging needs. So it's really nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you when we were looking for the new candidates, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Commissioner Overbeck.
Hi, Alex. I am a climate scientist and the dean of the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. And I grew up in Southeast Michigan, went away for a couple of decades, and I'm back.
Glad to have him back.
Happily back.
So, Alex, I will reach out to you and schedule an orientation so that you have a better sense. But after tonight's meeting, you will be 80% oriented, but we'll give you an opportunity to talk with us offline and answer any questions you might have. And if you're perplexed about something that happens tonight, you can talk to us then. So again, welcome from all of us. So next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I hope everybody's had a chance to look at it. Hopefully it's not a real heavy night tonight. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as posted? Motion from Commissioner McComber and a second from Councilmember Radina. All in favor say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Anyone opposed? It passes unanimously. Next is approval of the minutes. Similarly, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, or are there any? Well, let's take the motion first and then we'll ask if there's any changes. The motion to approve the minutes in a second, please. So moved by Commissioner McComber and seconded by Commissioner Juneau. Any recommended changes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as posted, please say aye and raise your hand. And anyone opposed? And I see everybody in the affirmative, so we're all set. So we are now at the point for the first public comment. I will read my spiel. This is an opportunity for members of the community to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you are watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also on the agenda. In the video feed, city staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone and you will hear an automated message or announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background noise. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller ending in 534.
Good evening. This is Tom Stahlberg, and I'm calling from 1202 Traver Street in Lower Town in Ann Arbor. You have an item on your agenda tonight that I would like to support, and that's with regards to the Robertson development, Deer Putting Trail in Devoren. I know you have yet to discuss and debate some of the details of it, and so I won't go into all the details, but because they might change. But in general, I am supportive of that resolution. A little background on me for you, Alex. Some of you know me. I've been in the real estate business for 30 years. I used to develop subdivisions. I got out of that a long time ago. I got into renovating old homes. A lot of them are duplexes. And I am intending and in preliminary plans to get back into developing multiple units, some additional duplexes or townhomes or both. I cannot imagine me building something new right now that would not meet the intent of A20, that would not meet what you're looking to do with that resolution. In general, I'm in favor of what Robertson Brothers is proposing. They have a mix of different housing types at that location, which I think is a good thing. And there's certainly no reason that mix of housing types can't be environmentally sustainable. We have the technology now. We have to do it. I do not see how we're going to meet our A20 goals by 2030 if we keep building buildings, new buildings, but we have the ability to make them more sustainable, and we don't do it. That puts us in a big deficit for everything else that we're doing in our efforts. I've been on the task force with landlords and tenants for our existing rental stock, figuring out how we're going to make rules to force us to do better than we are right now and to meet the A20 goals. And we have the ability with our certificate of compliance that all rental houses need to enforce certain rules and to bring us up to a higher level. It's a little scary for a small business like mine because if we don't do it, we don't get our certificate of compliance and we can't rent our property out. But I'm on board, however scared I am about it, because we have to do it. We don't have a choice. So we're going to get there if every single place we can, we find ways to make things better. Building large subdivisions, townhomes, homes, rental properties, a combination like at Robertson Brothers, we have to build them sustainably. I'm very disappointed with State and Eisenhower TC1 mass rezoning because it did not do what we needed to do in terms of construction there. We had more leverage. We've given millions of dollars of wealth to the property owners there. We could have done it in a different way that would have used their great wealth increase as a trade-off for some sustainable building built into it, embedded into it. We didn't do that, so let's do it this time. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for calling in and sharing your comments on the resolution.
Caller ending in 134.
Thank you, Dr. Stultz and Chair Mirsky, Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. Yeah, my comment is also on the village resolution. Really glad to see this. Now, some people are conflicted about placing this kind of condition on housing. With 80,000 people a day commuting into Ann Arbor, we're desperate for new homes of all types. Should we hold housing hostage, so to speak, to climate action? After all, housing avoids vehicle commutes and saves on gasoline, which is, of course, a climate benefit. Okay, a few points about this. First of all, it's not much more expensive, if at all, to go all electric. Last month, Chair Mirsky cited research, his own in the state of Pennsylvania's, that there is no cost premium for highly efficient all-electric buildings. This is Michigan, not Pennsylvania, so it may cost a bit more here. But we're in 2022. Our global carbon budget for a livable future is vanishing. Heat pumps should be standard for all new construction. Not really housing versus climate. It can and should be both. The village, if it goes with gas, will have a large negative impact. Using industry figures for Michigan average household gas use with a conversion factor that takes into account upstream methane emissions, these 484 homes will produce about 6,400 metric ton CO2 equivalent emissions annually. That will raise our citywide residential emissions from burning gas by 3%, just this one project. That's 6,400 metric tons every year for the next half century. Now let's consider commuter emissions avoided. Assume that one person a day for every one of these 484 units is currently commuting an average round trip distance of 20 miles. That's 9,680 miles a day, or 2.42 million miles a year prevented. At 30 miles per gallon, the village will save 80,000 gallons of gasoline a year. That prevents just over 900 metric tons CO2 a year in emissions. So your commuter savings are just 1/7 of the 6,400 tons you emit from burning gas in furnaces. Not a good trade-off. This project will still be a net climate disaster. If we hold the line on electrification, I'm confident Robertson Brothers will do it. There is precedent. In June 2020, several planning commissioners called on the Valhalla Glen apartment project to go all electric. And Valhalla, with its 454 units, quickly agreed. I'm pretty sure we can repeat this success next Tuesday with the village. The next step will be changing our codes so we don't have to fight this same battle every 2 weeks. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion, to tonight's presentations, and I thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Ken.
And we thank you for calling in.
Caller ending in 194.
Hello, Commission. This is Rita Mitchell calling. I'll give a disclosure here that I'm a member of the Environmental Commission and I serve as Vice Chair. I'm calling for myself tonight, though, because this is an issue that has not been addressed by the Environmental Commission. I want to say that I'm really pleased to see the resolution that you're considering tonight. It is the direction that we need to go in the future, and it's obviously the right period of time to do this in the sequence of events, to do it along with the zoning to require the electrification. In addition to the points that have been made by the other callers, another point in support of electrification rate will have its own carbon cost. So we should, at this point in our climate crisis, not add to the carbon emissions by allowing installation of fossil fuel infrastructure that'll be with us for a long time. So build it right the first time, set the stage with the zoning and the requirements, and avoid future retrofitting to electric power and effective energy efficiency. I'm really pleased that the resolution will include recommendations that relate to standards, so that there's a standards for the type of heat pump. I hope that there will be some addition to this that addresses insulation, so that we have our factors that are also result in less use of energy. That's helpful to all of us, as I know you all know. So I hope that we'll make this an outstanding opportunity for our community. And for additional items that you're discussing tonight with respect to the H20 plan, I hope that we will start including measures of progress that we can all see and use as a community so that we know we're going in the right direction. So we can make choices among ourselves as members of the community, as businesses, as NGO groups, et cetera, that support the direction that we need to go to support our climate, our environment. So that's it. Thanks very much. Good night.
Thank you for calling in.
That's Chair Mirsky.
That's it. Okay, great. So we're now into the crux of the agenda, and the first point is a presentation on the Community Climate Action Millage. I think Jason, welcome, Jason. So
thanks for having me.
You
disappeared there for a minute when I went over to co-host. Great to see a bunch of old friends. Nice to meet a few of you tonight.
By the way, Jason served on the Energy Commission as liaison a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And several of us were still on the commission. So
some of the
welcome
old
back.
timers. Thank
Welcome
you.
back.
It's an interesting place to be back to. So my day job is at the Huron River Watershed Council. I served on city council for a little while. Prior to that, I was on the Environmental Commission for a number of years. And when I was on council, I served on the Energy Commission. So great to be back, and amazing to watch all of the work that you all are doing and what you're pushing forward. So thank you all for your service. I also serve as the chair of the local Sierra Club group. And a number of those hats overlapping, I am helping to promote the A20 millage, which will be up for a vote in November. So I wanted to give you some background about the millage itself, about millages in general, in case there's any confusion. It's a bit wonky, and then just a little bit about where we're at in the process. When I was on the Environmental Commission and as a council member, I helped to ensure that Missy's position was created. I helped to identify the funding that was the start of the Office of Sustainability. And so there are quite a suite of interests and goals for me personally and professionally around this millage. As some of you may know, the funding, that base level funding that's a rebate from the county, will come up for renewal in a couple of years. And so we're looking at a potential for a loss of the base funding for the Office of Sustainability. And we want to make sure we get ahead of that timeline. As you know, I don't think I elected to not pull any slides together about the impending climate crisis that we are in the midst of. I think we're all familiar enough with that, and familiar enough with it getting drastically worse month after month. And so the more we can equip all of our constituents, all of our friends, and the city itself through the Office of Sustainability to fight this work is obviously critical. And so I'm just going to presume that we're all in agreement about that. I wanted to start off with a couple thoughts about millages in general. So the way that millages are created in Michigan is there's a suite of laws that predicate how the millage can be written up and what can be put on the ballot. It has to be short and sweet so that it's fairly legible, and it can't be particularly predictive in its implementation. And specifically related to this millage, because it will be a 20-year millage, we wanted, when the council members were crafting the millage language, they wanted to make sure that we weren't super predictive in what Missy and her staff could and couldn't do with those funds, say year 10, because we can only imagine that the fight, that what we need to work on now and what we need to work on 10 years hence will be very different scenarios. So Missy, if you want to pull up my PowerPoint, I would appreciate that. That is to say, the way that the government puts millages and all politics into play is less than perfect. And I'm going to come back to this point repeatedly during our conversation today. I think it's very, very, very important for us to not let perfect be the enemy of the good in a lot of environmental situations. And climate change work is certainly one of them. Here's our website for the advocacy arm of this millage renewal. Obviously, this is separate completely from the government. It's part of the millage campaign that's being done simply by residents and other folks. Folks that are on the team, including myself from the Watershed Council and the Sierra Club, Mike Garfield from the Ecology Center, a few other past council members, a number of students from the University of Michigan, and we've hired a couple consultants to do some work because it will be a long, arduous end of the summer for us. Moving on, Missy, I wanted to review what is actually going to be on the ballot. This, as you read through it, if you haven't already, is again moderately specific, but not nearly as specific as some might want. Again, that's part of the process of millage creation. And so with that, City Council, Mike Garfield from the Ecology Center, myself, and a number of other people really pushed on the council members, and I appreciate their responsiveness on this matter to include as many aspects of equity, inclusion, and related issues for renters and other folks in our community to build in as much support for them as we possibly could, which is a number of the things that I'm going to highlight in our conversation today. Missy, if you'd move on, please. I'm going to show you two different supporting documents that council passed along with this resolution to put that ballot language on in November. And I have highlighted a number of things that I want to call out in the assumption that we all know that folks that are middle class and upper class and white folks who drive their electric vehicles and can pay to put solar panels on their houses, that's amazing that we have a lot of folks in town that are like that. And we have lots of people in town that we need to support that don't have the capacity to do those things. Folks who are in rentals are disproportionately removed from the ability to do those things or join into those initiatives. Not everybody has the ability to buy a fancy new car. And I was really happy that the council members went the extra mile to try to include some of those aspects in these resolutions related to the millage. And so, as you might and probably know, expanding composting and recycling to multifamily units in the downtown area has been a craw in for folks in those areas for a really long time, and the work that the OSI has done to improve those things has been great. But as we all know, the biggest impediment to, say, composting by all of our residents has been that we haven't had year-round composting. The lack of consistency there and the confusion that happens with inconsistent service providing is the biggest hurdle we have for increasing composting. The second point I wanted to make under number B is that obviously you guys have been involved in the solar and geothermal conversations, but just as importantly that is called out, is that it's also called out for specifically lower income households. This is the language that council put forward with the millage that will be staff's marching orders if and when this millage passes. Can you go on to the next slide for me, Missy? Number C there, again, supporting energy efficiency and weatherization. Obviously, those are things that we're all into, and I assume you guys talk about at every meeting or every other meeting. But with this resolution, they also supported this specific number of 40% going towards lower income residents. Again, this millage proposal that's going to be on the ballot is general, but these points that they're making here in this resolution that was passed along at the same time will be the guideposts for staff and staff's work. Point D is the neighborhood and community resilience centers, which we've heard a lot about in the news. These have obviously been located specifically at locations that have the past ones that OSI has done have been working primarily at locations that service under-resourced communities and community members. Bike lanes, crosswalk infrastructure in neighborhoods, and pathways. These are all things that we all use, but they disproportionately benefit folks without cars. And so point after point here, we have things that support our community in general, but also support those who are most in need in our community. And I think that's very important. Missy, would you go on, please? The last couple points on this, this document that council passed, the bulk buy discount initiatives. We've all seen that for solar, but reducing the cost of barrier and the barriers to entry for programs will help get those second and third phase folks who are interested in all those initiatives to join those of us who have had the ability to get solar or geothermal in the past. Electric vehicle charging stations, I think, is the splashy thing that we see about in the news all the time. And I think it goes without saying that that's going to be part of this work. But the component that goes to multi-residential locations to benefit folks who don't own their own home or live and work downtown is very, very valuable. The last couple points there. This one's actually my favorite. Council directs staff that the millage would be used to the fullest extent possible to advance equity. I'm going to come back to a couple other points in a moment, but all this language is future looking, right? This is council directing future staff and future council members that this was our intent when passing this millage. And that's where we're going with this. There's still a lot of questions about, does the Office of Sustainability, does the staff have the capacity and the dedication to do that work? And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. Missy, would you go on to the last point? The last slide. Oh, thank you. This attachment was also passed by council with the resolution to put this vote on the November ballot. This was some rough estimates of where the Office of Sustainability thought that the biggest chunks of money would be going in the first couple of years of this millage. They're big round numbers and the total is very large. But what I wanted to point out is these strategies more or less line up with the things that I just brought up. And the dollar amounts are not disproportionately different for the ones that create more equitable life in Ann Arbor. We're not underfunding some of those components just because they're helping certain portions of the population. Again, this is council's direction to staff for the first few years. And after that, the process is going to have to be iterative. Missy, would you go on to the last slide again? Request before I forget about it, jump onto our website at any point. We have a get involved and an endorsement page. I'm very happy that a number of you have already endorsed the millage. Thank you very much. Some of your names are on the website and some of them haven't gotten on there. Thank you to one of the folks who was on the call for your endorsement today. I appreciate that. Missy, you can stop sharing the screen and I'd like to make a few more points before we move on. So there's this component of the millage that's forward-looking. This is council's best direction towards where we want to spend this money. This millage would raise obviously just shy of $7 million a year for 20 years. That gets us less than $200 million. The A20 plan is roughly $1 billion. So we're going to need more money. We need a lot more money than we're bringing in right now. Missy told me in a conversation sort of recently that they're getting close to a one-on-one fundraising match, like what the base funding that we bring in and the funding that they've been able to bring in the office with grants and other partnerships and stuff. And I firmly believe that their staff will continue to escalate that number. And so if we're bringing shy of $2 million a year in, I'm sorry, 200 million, and we double that or triple that, we start to get somewhere within striking distance of getting the A20 plan done. So that's a lot of crystal balling, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but council has, in my estimation, guideposts that are reasonable, allow the staff a flexibility to do things as they need to, but also direct in a way that's meaningful. And so the question then begs, can the staff pull this off? Will the staff pull this off? And I just want to go through a few of the accomplishments that OSI has had, because to me, watching what Missy and her staff have done, their heart is in all of that work. You know, she is in it for climate change and energy, but the equitable component is the most important, is equally as important. If we're not saving everybody, why would we do the thing in the first place? So just a few wins over the last couple of years, just pulling out of some random report that the city creates. Thanks, Missy, for making reports. Love it. Obviously, the staff has had a lot of awards. They've done tons of education, so much education, so like hundreds of community engagement outings, right? But they created the low to moderate income solar access program, the range replacement program. And if you're not familiar, indoor air pollution is disproportionately harmful to people with lower income. And so the range replacement program helps people with lower means more than it does others. The Aging in Place Efficiently program, pilot and then evaluation that happened over the last couple of years, so helping our older citizens and residents. The Bike Discount Buy program helps everybody. The 10,000 Trees program that's had a huge splash, like initiative after initiative. I love the ambassadors program, not only because they let me come and talk to the cohorts, but because that's redoubling the capacity of the staff by creating literal ambassadors out there in the community. I already mentioned the neighborhood resilience funds hubs, but this is really important to me, like that we are creating resiliency hubs in the places with the communities that need it the most. Right? When my power went out and I was out of town, I was able to call somebody, get somebody to hook a generator up or toss an electrical cord over my fence. But if you don't have a place to go, what do you do when you don't have electricity or air conditioning and it's 100 degrees out, or access to food? And so helping those communities is critical. Specifically, if you're not familiar, Northside Community Center, Bryant, and the Ann Arbor Senior Center. What else do I want to talk about there? I think that's enough for right now. A few early endorsers that we had, just to give you a list of folks. Obviously, the Citizens Climate Lobby, climate justice folks, a number of university groups, including the Environmental Consulting Organization and Live Zero Waste, the Sierra Club, the Ecology Center, National Wildlife Federation, the United Way of Washtenaw County, Viridian, of course, and the County Democratic Party Executive Board. This is an issue, as we all know, that crosses all sectors, and everyone should and could be on board with the success of and the need here. And so that's all that I wanted to start with, and I wanted to have plenty of time for Q&A if folks wanted, and if Missy wanted me to cover anything else. We would love your support as individuals, as representatives of the organization. It's dicey, it's inappropriate for you to be directly supportive, but as individuals and residents, in whatever other portion of your life that you see fit, joining the team in whatever way that you have time or financial means would be greatly appreciated. And when we have a kickoff event in a few weeks, we'll ask you all to invite anybody you know to come and join us, because it'll be a grand party, knocking on doors or delivering literature. If you haven't done it, it's fun. Missy, did I miss anything that you wanted me to cover?
This is your show. Yeah, I'm happy to turn it over, Chair Mirsky, to you and facilitate any questions or discussions. And I actually, the one thing I will say is we are standing up a website. We're working on it right now from the city's perspective. Just so you know, Jason identified this too. The city can only be fact-based, right? So I can only tell you very clearly what our budget looks like, because I have a 2-year budget. I can tell you what the language is, but everything outside of that has to go through the committee. So I'm not being coy if I'm or being stern. I'm just staying within boundaries here.
It's literally the law, and so we have to be for everybody on the committee. You have to be really careful to differentiate your city work with your advocacy work, and the staff particularly so. I have the luxury of working for an advocacy nonprofit, and so I don't have to. But you can change hats. You all can change hats and take off your committee hat and be a resident.
So thank you very much, Jason. Tell us again, or maybe share very briefly so people can write down the website where we can get information, where we can enter our endorsements, etc. Or maybe if it's very simple, you can just read it off to us.
It is A2, the letter, the numeral, climate action. And I believe we got .org, so it doesn't really matter. There it is, highlighted and everything.
Okay.
Thanks, Missy.
Great. So hopefully everybody notes that down. And then we'll, I'd like to ask you, if I may, one question first. And that is, I know that there was an FAQ that was developed. Is that on the website, and is that under resources, or where is that to be found?
I do believe that is, well, almost all the material under the from that original FAQ is on the website in some different places. Yep.
So I'm just pointing out because in your advocacy work for this, that's a really good place to go, because it answers a lot of basic questions about the millage and spending and so on and so forth. So yes. We already have Councilmember Briggs biting at the bit here. So I'll recognize her, and then anyone else that has any questions.
Thanks, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it and appreciate the advocacy around this. And my question is actually just super basic. It's around the language of the ballot proposal. Just, I know that sometimes this comes up, the sentence in there that talks about, from the state of Michigan, this can be used by, this may be collected by, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm trying to remember what it says, something about it, it may be collected by the DDA or Brownfield or, let's see. In accordance with state law, a portion of the millage may be subject to capture by the DDA or Washtenaw County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. I know that's sort of standard language, but sometimes it comes up. I just wondered if you maybe could just speak to the inclusion of that language.
I forget. Councilmember Adina, do you remember why that's included? It's something to do with the fact that they can pull taxes separately from the city, right? So they can pre-pull if there's a TIF in an area, they can pre-pull taxes, and it's something to do with the nuance of that. And I can't remember what the legal component is there. I'm sorry, and I can look that up and send it back to you if you prefer.
If you know where to find that information, that would be great. I would certainly welcome it. I know it comes up sometimes, and I couldn't quite remember the answer to it myself. So, okay, thanks.
If I may piggyback on that question, that would be a great addition, if it's not already there, to the FAQ, because that's bound to come up, given that it's right in the language of the ballot language. So.
Great point. Thank you.
Great input. Others? Come on, folks. I know that some of you are going to be wild supporters of this initiative, but you still might have a question here or there. I have a couple. If you don't, maybe that'll tease out some other comments. So I'll start with mine. First of all, can proceeds from the millage be used to hire staff?
I believe so.
That's also my understanding too, because I think millages fund other activities where also staff are involved too. So.
Yep. So folks know the city has hundreds of income streams. A suite of them are millages. The millages are actually fairly simple because it's the language in the millage that is the mandatory component. And so what we see here, what is on the ballot is legally binding. The accompanying council resolutions are binding to staff. And they look like really, really different things. Other money that comes into the city, like grants, can and can't do all sorts of things also. It is our presumption that this money, or a vast majority of this money, is going to go through OSI, but that is a staff decision. We can't micromanage in that way, right, from the outside. Yeah, we presume that a number of these things will be capacity building related, and some of that will be internal to the organization.
Thanks. I'll continue with my questions and hope that others raise their hand. One thing I'd like to point out, having read the use resolution, and I hope my recollection is correct, is that the use resolution outlines an approximate allocation of spending. It's not absolutely binding, and it's not something that is going to hold the city to 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, because things will change. And so if you get questions to that effect, it's not that because the use resolution says we're going to spend $1 million roughly of this on circular economy and zero waste, that we will spend $1 million on that in year 19 of proceeds of the millage. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding and interpretation.
Yeah, the use resolution, the last document that I shared that we looked at very briefly with the dollar amounts on it, and I can get Missy it's all in Legistar anyway.
Yeah.
That's where I pulled it, because that's the official location, right? That's what council passed. Right. And that document that was passed with that, it would be the first year of implementation. And so that's the those are the guideposts for the first year. And there was a lot of politicking about not just like how much, but like how, as you bring up, Mr. Mirsky, how far into the future we wanted that to like state what staff was going to be doing. And I think wisely council decided to set forward a goal for the first year. I would have been happy for 1 or 2 years, but like that's just silliness to get into that level of detail when we're talking about the international climate challenges, right? Like, who cares? I mean, we need the money to go to good things. That's really critical, and I think we've set up enough backstops here that get us that. But yes, that document that was shared does have some really rough dollar amounts for those programs that I sort of talked about.
And I think that goes hand in hand with the explicit statement that the 820 plan is a living plan. And it doesn't make sense for us to pretend to be able to foresee technological changes, legislative changes, and things like that out many years. And so if you get questions about that, this allows the city flexibility to spend this in a wise way. And I think it's also important to recognize, for everybody's edification, the city's budget is approved every year, and also there are levels of approval for city expenditures. And so it's not that Missy is going to be given a pot of $6.7 million and she can spend it any way she wants to. Oops, Missy, they're telling you to go home. So this is subject to appropriate overview by City Council. It's something that we as a commission will probably have input on, in future years. And it's also obviously subject to approval by, Missy's leadership structure. So I want people to realize that, anybody that's listening in, as well as on the commission, if you get questions about that. Missy.
I just wanted to add to that. I think that's a really great conversation that we've worked on. Well, I've worked on a 2-year budget for the first 2 years, where there's much more clarity if it passes, right, about what we would do, and if we had started kind of normalizing that. And an example, just picking the very first topic around circular economy, is the idea of getting to multifamily compost requires sustained funding. Right. So we've had certain years where we've had a surplus budget where we could do it once, but the hope that's an initiative that will need sustained funding for a period of time. but there will be more upfront to create it, and then it drops in what will be needed going forward. So that frees up more money to do something else in the system. And so we've been working internally with staff in case the millage were to pass, that we can move very quickly in setting up those kinds of initiatives. Same with transportation. We worked with them to understand their multi-year plan and which projects aren't going to make it into the budget given existing resources that we bring forward, bike infrastructure, more pedestrian infrastructure, that the millage would unlock capital for. So just wanted to share that same with the general theory. We have much greater clarity in the first few years because we know what we have and we know what we don't have in terms of resources. And then it'll be a rolling cycle.
Great. Other questions? I have a few other comments and questions. If not, so I'm going to let you continue to noodle over your questions of your own. SEU and municipal utility, potential uses of millage funds?
Yep. I think we're all in agreement that diversified electrification is an important goal. And the millage is not what was intentionally kept separate from that conversation. Like those need to be, they need to be separate conversations. Building one to force a hand of another or to only work if one thing happens, does not do climate work justice. And so I have my personal preferences about the electrification programming, but like that's completely separate from this millage. And this millage would support that work, if by nothing else, support the Office of Sustainability's work in that. But it could go on to support whatever those initiatives grow into being also. And we need the money on the table so that we can do the things, right? If we don't have the money to create those initiatives, it's going to be a lot harder to get there.
Another comment, Jason mentioned the rebate from the county public safety millage, and that, I believe, correct me, Missy and Jason, if I'm wrong, the share going to climate action up from that rebate is $800,000 a year. And as Jason indicated, that's going to be going away in another, 5 or 6 years, something like, only 2 more years.
I think it's due in 20, I think the vote is due in 24. So okay. I'm not sure exactly how funding pulls through over time is complicated. Missy, do you know when that would actually sunset?
I mean, I really hoped we had 4 years left, so I will now go check. And to clarify, it's 40% of the base. So it was 800,000 in the first year, but as taxable values go up and down,
okay, true.
It's always 40%.
Right. Yep. It was 2.2 million and it was 40% of that 800,000, but then as taxable values go up, it goes up. But I think it's important. My point was, unless we have alternative source and funding sources, we're going to lose that really important funding source for climate action. And that underwrites a lot of Missy's activities and her staff and things like that. So I think as we advocate for this, hopefully that people will understand that. The last question that I have is, I guess, twofold. There is a Ann Arbor area Transportation Authority millage that is on the ballot in August. That is an increase of 1.68 mils for 5 years. It's 2.68 total, but one is renewing. And this is an additional mill. As all of us either pay property taxes indirectly or directly, then this will have an impact on what we pay either in taxes or in rent. And I'm wondering what we can do to address people's concerns that Ann Arbor is becoming unaffordable, and that this is something that Ann Arbor needs to do. So I'll just leave it there. Yeah.
And I think for my part of that, like, I've seen Missy's wisdom in so many things, obviously, but also very much in the AATA is there to do AATA's work, and the city is there to be a good partner to AATA, and because they're different agencies, it's their decision to put something on the ballot, just like the public schools, just like WISD. They all have jurisdiction, and that's appropriate, and that's democracy. That's our version of democracy. That said, like I noted through most of my presentation, I'm really proud that staff and council pushed to have the A20 millage have a lot of equity related components to it, and I think that's really important. And I do agree. Like, I just got my tax bill. I agree that it's not insignificant, and just as importantly as how we think about services and cost, as you guys are thinking about later on in this meeting, and as many of the callers called in, diversified housing that doesn't mandate car trips is critical for affordability and health. And this millage sets the city up to assist on those matters, and have the capacity to do those things and to redouble those things.
Anyone else have any questions? Seeing none, Jason, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, Carmen.
I do real quick. Thanks. As far as like the interface between the electrifying buses and the AATA millage, can you speak to that a little bit to explain that?
I'm intentionally not involving myself in the AATA millage, and it's also not an area of expertise for me. So I apologize. I don't know if anybody else on the call can answer that.
The millage is not about electrifying the transit.
The millage that I'm here to talk about.
The AAT millage and this one as well. Yeah.
Oh, both of them. Okay.
Nothing to that. Okay. About it.
It's more about I think route extension and primarily frequency of service. Those are the main things. Frequency and then extension of service, so that it covers more times and makes it more accessible to providers.
Is there information about emissions though, as far as extension of routes and service? I mean, which is really important. It's it's a value for sure, and there's a need for it. But as far as like the corresponding increase in emissions, I mean, how is that something that the city is like advising ATA on or anything like that?
I don't think that's something the ride wants our advice on, to be candid. So at this point, I would say most information is going to be on their website and on their campaign website to learn more about what that millage entails. And apologies, I only know what I know that's pretty public too. So I don't have any. I don't know if Councilmember Briggs, you have any details.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that in the long range plan, the way that the rides millage, it's broken up into 5-year millage renewal requests, and so it in terms of if the millage is adopted passed by voters, it's not focused in on electrification of buses in the next 5 years. It does have it, I think, in if I'm remembering, maybe 2040 timeframe or something like that. It's one of the furthest out kind of components in their plan, and I know their board in the past has wrestled with kind of the use of. I think that's probably just a separate discussion for maybe not worth going into right now, but I think that there are folks on the AATA board would be happy to, or in their millage group that would be happy to talk about that item.
One of the questions I have that relates to this conversation here with the climate millage is the transition or the modification of roads to make them more bicycle or pedestrian friendly, and how that affects the drivability in the city, and how that would possibly increase the ridership for AATA. And then having them, be driving around with vehicles that are highly polluting, like how that all balances out. That's one of the things I'm looking at from a bigger picture.
All I can share from the staff perspective is that we regularly communicate with our colleagues at the ride. And I sit on a propulsion study to try to help them figure out how they're going to decarbonize their fleet. It is separate than the millage ask that they're going for, and it is outside of our purview in the city itself. But that is an area where we are not quiet about the need to decarbonize that fleet if we're going to hit our goals, and have offered lots of support, including grant fundraising, even in my own time, to help unlock resources that are available today to do some of that work. So we stand ready to collaborate.
So there are a small handful of folks on the call that are part of climate advocacy organizations. That's not an inappropriate place for us to go with our advocacy, is to the ride.
Okay, yeah, I think that it's a kind of a complex, interplay with you have a city, moving in a particular direction, and then you have a separate organization whose actions could possibly be, very counterproductive to the efforts. And so for me, it's important that just like we could just talk about it and make sure that folks are really, keeping these things in mind as far as the complexity and of the different policies that we're looking at, the different monetary commitments that we're making, and we're having an entire city commit to, whether they vote yes or no on it. If it does pass, then we have these commitments that we're following through on, which we want them to be as productive as possible. It's all about reducing the emissions, right? Like how much CO2 emissions are we reducing? And in the meantime, there's other actions that are being taken that are, going in the opposite direction. So,
Carlene, I think the hope is that as ridership goes up because of better service, then vehicle miles traveled will go down, and overall emissions will go down, even if there is more frequent service and things like that. The hope is that by better providing more service, more people will rely on public transit, and they won't be in their cars and things like that. So the hope is that makes a positive contribution to decarbonization. The little that I know is that the main concern with within AATA and with their board is the upfront costs. And I know Missy also is aware of this. There's some recent outreach to the AATA about the model that has been deployed in Montgomery County, Maryland, to essentially eliminate upfront costs and apply, which could potentially be applied to Ann Arbor. So if any of you aren't familiar with that, you might Google EV buses, Montgomery County, Maryland, and take a look at that agreement that was reached there. And some of the people behind that have requested to be able to meet with the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority people. So I wouldn't say that they're the millage is at odds with the 820 plan. That's speaking for myself, and I'm not an expert, but that's from what I know.
And I think there's something to be said about, so the Office of Sustainability and the city in general has done a reasonable job over the last few years at electrifying the fleet. And as we advocate and provide resources and infrastructure for the community at large to do so also, it's easier for folks to accept those types of changes when it's been proven to be a workable scenario here locally with your sort of like neighbor peers or whatever. And so that pressure is not inconsequential, but it definitely is not, it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah, I do understand that this is something that it also takes time. I do get that. I totally do. I just wanted to bring this up as something, as a consideration, and for us to just continue to be aware of.
Well, Jason, thanks again for your time.
Thanks for having me or having the conversation. I really appreciate it. And
Yep.
It was really nice to see all of you and meet a couple of you.
Great to see you again, Jason. We wish you had here more often.
Thanks.
Okay. We are now moving on to the next point in the agenda, which is consideration of a draft resolution. And it was posted to Legistar late yesterday. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. It ties to some of the comments that we had in the public input section. Maybe while Missy is pulling that up, I want to make a few comments. First of all, I want to give credit where credit is due, and that is to Ken Garber. Ken emailed me yesterday and indicated that one of the things that he was working on was trying to get word out about this development and his concerns that it wasn't clear whether or not it was going to be designed based on the aspirations, let's put it that way, and the goals of the 820 plan. And so I had the idea of us considering a resolution tonight and trying to pass it and passing that on to the Planning Commission that will be considering the development next Tuesday, as well as then advising City Council. And I reached out to Missy, and in parallel, unbeknownst to me, Ken drafted this resolution. He sent it to me. I reviewed it. I made one tiny little tweak that Missy also tweaked the tweak. And so what you have in front of you is this resolution. And just one minor point, the Planning Commission's announcement for the meeting indicates that the development will be 561 units. There was an MLive article in February that indicated it was going to be 538 units. And it's my understanding that the latest site plan and paperwork submitted is now 484 units. And so that is why the resolution says at least 484 units. So Councilmember Briggs, I think you have something to comment on that.
I do, and it might be helpful to just, and I'm not sure who's doing, Missy, I guess you've got it up on your screen. Can you scroll down to the resolved clauses? Thank you. So thank you so much, John, for bringing this forward, and for Ken. I know this is, we've been hearing about this. I think, public commenters spoke to the importance of this. This is an area where it can be very frustrating to be at. We don't have the tools that we would like to have as a city because of the state building code to require the things that we'd like to see in buildings. And so we are stuck between recognizing that we desperately need more housing in our community, that having folks that are living closer to where they work and is beneficial for our carbon neutrality plans. But what we can't do, unfortunately, or we would have, is require it. And so I think the hope was that maybe we've got this tool here because we're rezoning. And so maybe we can provide that as a condition. And I just want to say, unfortunately, we can't. So that's called conditional rezoning. And conditional rezoning requires that it can happen, but it needs to be voluntarily offered by the developer. So we cannot require it as a city as a condition that they have to do X, Y, or Z within of this. And so particularly of this substance. So yeah, I understand the desire behind this. I think there's still an opportunity potentially to pass a resolution. I would just suggest that it's going to need to say it's going to need to be watered down a little bit, essentially. I would recommend if you still want to move forward with this and have a voice at Planning Commission and Council, that you might say something like, resolve that the Ann Arbor Energy Commission urges the Planning Commission and City Council to encourage all buildings in the village to be constructed with fully electric appliances. for space and water heating and for cooking. And then pull out, we can't do it as a condition of rezoning, that next.
So I'm going to interrupt you. Just
yes, absolutely.
The process properly.
Yeah, so I would offer that as an amendment.
What I would like to do first is have a motion that we consider the resolution, a second, and then once we have that, then we will do exactly what Missy has done and jumping ahead and recognize the modification or the amendment that Councilmember Briggs has proposed. Can we have a motion to
consider this amendment?
So moved and seconded by Councilmember McComber. Thank you. So moved by Commissioner Peck and seconded by Commissioner McComber. And
and then I guess I would offer as an amendment to the existing resolution, this language that would essentially encourage rather than require it. I would like to require it.
Yep. And so Missy, I think the language then has to be struck as a condition of rezoning and site plan approval. So exactly, that has to be struck out, right?
And I have, and I have confirmed that this is, and I have confirmed that this is the case. It's
further comments or discussion?
I'm wondering, should we be thinking about encouraging all future development or something along those lines? Or are we going to, with each development, do this kind of thing?
Commissioner or Councilmember Briggs and Missy weigh in on this, but we can't do that. At least that's the current interpretation, because of the state building and energy code. So there was some discussion about whether or not we could do a natural gas ban, as has been done in California and many municipalities and in a few other places scattered around the United States. But right now, the interpretation is, at least by some, and Ken Garber feels differently, and we've talked about that with Missy, but there's, and I don't know if that's changing or not, but the sense is that we cannot do something that would require it at the municipal level.
Well, I'm not saying require, I'm just saying here we're encouraging, and we should be encouraging all future development. In other words, if you're a developer and you're saying, oh, I'm going to do something in Ann Arbor, one of the things that's on your radar screen from day one is, let's think about all electric, no fossil fuel.
Yeah. We could change the language. I mean, it's already in the 820 plan that essentially all development needs to be all electric and not burn in any gas. So it's implicitly, or you could even say explicitly there. We could add that language here again and say, encourage that all buildings in the village and all future developments, commercial and residential, be constructed with fully electric appliances. Is that essentially what you're recommending?
That would be fine, yeah.
Just a process point. I think we're talking about a second amendment. Is that right? Or are you saying to this amendment? Because I don't actually think we had a second to debate it. You introduced it, but.
Oh, okay. So you want to propose some language? Do we have to do that for every single amendment?
Well, we should vote on the amendment and make sure that the body is comfortable with discarding this and highlight and add this is the replacement result.
And I will second, Council Member.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's vote on this amendment, and then we can take up a second amendment. How's that? So all in favor of this amendment with the possibility of further amendments, say aye and raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? None opposed. The amendment passes unanimously. So we have a second proposed amendment, which is, I think, the wording that Commissioner Overpeck has proposed, which would expand on this. And do you want to propose language and then get a, and then we can ask for a second?
Okay, how about encourage all the buildings in the village, as well as all subsequent buildings in new buildings in Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor, be constructed, or something like that.
So do we have a second for that?
I will second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. So this is a vote then to replace not only the first or the original resolve clause, but to replace the first amendment. All those in favor of this broader.
Actually, I would like to discuss this for a second.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks. So, and I see this as I understand the point of this of just sort of expanding upon the language. I guess I would like to. This starts venturing into the question of, do we believe that new buildings should be built if they cannot be all electric? So we know that we have a significant housing shortage in the city of Ann Arbor. There's immense pressure that has huge equity issues, considerations, affordability issues. And so we've got these various policy goals that council is trying to achieve right now. And we are really hampered by the fact that our building code does not allow us to require them. And so this is encouraging the city and ostensibly city council. I'm wondering if Energy Commission means this is directing this towards developers or directing this towards council. I mean, are you encouraging council not to approve new developments that aren't electric? Are you encouraging developers to recognize this crisis that we're in and voluntarily begin doing this? So I guess that's my question around this.
Where I'm coming from, is it all right if I answer?
Yes, please. Yeah, you're on the off.
I mean, that's a good question. I just think that any more fossil fuel gas, that is going to make our A20 pretty difficult. The other point is that the cost of electrification keeps going down. And that what we're really encouraging, and we're only encouraging, both developers and council, is that we're encouraging those two bodies to install what is likely to be cheaper and therefore more affordable for those who move in. But, if we have A20 as a goal by 2030, we can't keep putting fossil fuel in buildings. It's just doesn't add up.
Commissioner Kerber, and then Commissioner Juneau, and then Councilmember Radina.
Yes, well, I fully support this. I also have this ongoing concern about the way these buildings are being designed by the architects, that really, when we talk about an appliance, you're talking about something that has a 15-year life. Whereas you're talking about a roof, you're talking about something that has 100+ years of life. And the way the roofs are being designed very often totally ignores the solar resource that's available to those buildings. And again, I can both support this and say this is inadequate in terms of the new housing that's being built here in the city. All you have to do, I can take you for a ride around the city and show you buildings that should never have been built the way they're built. And it shouldn't happen, not in 2020, not in 2021, not in 2022. And I see this going on and on and on until we figure out how to stop it. So that's more of just a general issue that I have. And I'm open to any comments.
So if I can elaborate on that, I think Larry and I had a communication on this. It's making sure that roofs are, as to the degree possible, are south-facing, that they're not interrupted with all kinds of dormers and things like that. I mean, obviously there's multiple considerations, but that's what he's referring to when he's talking about solar access not being designed into the building. Right, Larry? Commissioner Juneau.
Yeah, I guess to Councilmember Briggs's point, but also, you know, seeing the value and to Ken's point on the comment earlier about, you know, not wanting to do this ad hoc every time this comes up. I do wonder if maybe rather than using the all subsequent buildings clause, we just develop this more as a template and use it as relevant buildings are suggested. I think to Councilmember Briggs' point, there may be some situations where the equity and the housing need versus the size of the building and the need for whatever else might, you know, I don't know. So I guess I'm just offering that as, I would support this amendment, but I also do see the value and just really think of this as more of a template and being able to use this more quickly in the future for relevant units.
Councilmember Radina.
Thanks. Kind of piggybacking off of what Commissioner Juneau just said and relating back to something Councilmember Briggs said, you know, I think because this was brought to us, you know, kind of within the last 48 hours here, and because I am generally loath to kind of like writing resolutions on the fly at the table, I wonder if it would be more beneficial for us to stay focused kind of on the village right now, because as Councilmember Briggs pointed out, there are some intricacies and some challenges in this. I think we all agree in principle with our need to have, you know, all buildings be electric, particularly with appliances. I am thinking, though, even of a conversation I had with Jennifer Hall once around, you know, some of the state funding isn't always available when, you know, you don't have gas appliances if they're cheaper. I'm trying to remember the details of that conversation that happened, you know, 6 months to a year ago. And I would, because of the potential trade-off that a broader resolution suggests, similar to what Councilmember Briggs said about, you know, are we suggesting that if we can't accomplish these things, we should not do the housing? I think it's important for us to make sure we take a step back and consider kind of all of the different factors that might go into that, particularly around, you know, affordable housing, where we might have outside grants or state funding or federal funding that might be coming in, and what requirements that might impose upon us that then require us to make some decisions on trade-offs. And so, I am, I guess, just encouraging maybe a little bit of caution around. I would be hesitant to expand this without us having kind of a broader conversation with some expertise from different staff weighing in.
Commissioner Peck, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I'm fine with this. You know, I think we have some comments that are coming from folks who are much more experienced than I am in the ways of city government. So maybe what we should be thinking of as a commission is producing some kind of guidance that covers these important issues and trade-offs. And it's outside my expertise to really be able to write something like that. But I do know that with every building that gets built with the gas line coming into it, we're moving away from our A20. And we're probably also condemning the occupants to higher energy bills in the long term, even though it's expedient and cheaper to, in some cases, to go with that fossil fuel now. Although with the price of gas right now, you got to wonder. But in any case, it might be better for us as a body to just step back and do exactly as it's being suggested and not make this more general and plan on a general guidance suggestion, that's all it is, for the future.
Missy.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer as we consider this that maybe what the body as a whole, if it's friendly, considers the resolution that's more time sensitive, which is about this development, and then we work a few folks that are interested on a more general resolution that shares the sentiment of the Energy Commission, which I think is more than just electric, although that's a part. We've talked about embodied carbon. We've obviously talked about renewably powered. And so maybe that's something we introduce at a future Energy Commission meeting, is a kind of guidance for developers and guidance for council of here's the Energy Commission stance on what we hope to see in developments.
Councilmember Briggs.
I think that makes sense, though. I'd actually say it's probably worth the time of this commission to wrestle with this issue, even a little more deeply than that. We can do a lot of encouraging up on the city's website, and it's except for those developers that are particularly interested in this, and then they hit certain blockades within the city around what makes it challenging to do some of this work sometimes. But is another thing I've heard. But I think that there's a lot of misconceptions. I think resources for developers would be very helpful. I know some of the folks that I've talked with. I don't know that they have the tools the knowledge that they need to recognize that they could do this and not have it make the development significantly more expensive. So I do think there's a need for resources. I know that this is something that the Planning Commission wrestles with and the City Council wrestles with. And so I think figuring out, even if there are small steps and changes that we can make within code, if we have any leeway anywhere, we should take advantage of that. But this is a huge issue for the city right now, and one that we often feel really stuck on. So I would like to see us do anything we can to move it forward.
Commissioner Juneau.
Yeah, thank you. I was really going to say something along the same lines, and just hope that we might be able to dedicate some time to thinking through like carrots and sticks and all sorts of tools that are within our legal ability here to incentivize this, because I think, at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about that this already is reflected in the 820 plan, and a resolution will reaffirm that, but will that, change what's happening in these moment-to-moment instances? So just, I think it would be well worth our time.
Any other commissioners? So if I may, I'll weigh in. I'm fine with limiting this to the First Amendment. I would encourage both the Energy Commission and the Planning Commission to wrestle with this and come to a conclusion quickly. I'd like to remind everyone of Ken Garber's comments prior to our last meeting, which, using rule of thumb calculations, and I think they're generally directionally good, that projects that have been approved recently completely offset all of the solar that is going to be going on solar buildings, all of the solarized projects, by a factor of 2, or another way of looking at that is that it will also offset roughly 1/3 of the landfill solar project if it goes forward. So for all of the time that we delay on this, it's having significant negative outcomes and outcomes to the 820 plan. I'd also like to remind everyone of Mr. Garber's rule of thumb calculations, indicating that there's roughly a 7-to-1 emissions difference between a unit being powered and let's say using heat from natural gas for water, air, and cooking compared to commuting miles reduced. So it's not like we're doing any great favor there. I fully understand the affordability issue. I've grappled with this in work that I've done for another nonprofit. And I just like to share briefly something that I mentioned before. And this is something where I hope we can bring someone in quickly to hopefully shift the paradigm, that if housing is done that is all electric, that is built to passive house standards, that means very, very tight and very well insulated envelope, including windows, that you can do that construction at an equal cost, or at least no more than a penalty of 1 or 2%. And for that, you get a quieter building, a more comfortable building, a building that has much lower utility costs per person. This is the experience with multiple multifamily dwellings in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. I'm more than happy to try to get someone to speak to that. And in the end, we're actually providing tenants a more affordable and better living condition than if we approve cheap housing that is still supplied with natural gas. So I really think you're absolutely right. Those have raised the issue. We need more education on this. Since it's the Planning Commission that deals with these issues, we really need to get these alternative paradigm shifting opinions in front of the Planning Commission and have those be challenged back and forth, and also be considered in the context of Michigan versus these other states. But I'm confident that the general sentiment that we need to move to all electric buildings that with very tight envelopes that are very well insulated as soon as possible, and that will benefit everybody, also including affordability. So Commissioner Overpeck, Commissioner Calvin Garcia.
Thank you. I'm just not quite clear. Is it that we're not going to proceed with this resolution at all, or we're going to have further discussion at it in a future meeting, or we're going to just stick with the original, like more just with this particular project that initiated the entire discussion, the resolution tonight?
So we have one amendment that has been approved, which is the resolved clause in front of us that's a mixture of black and red. And we have a second clause that has been moved and seconded but not voted on. And I think the proposal that I'm hearing that, or some people are suggesting, is that we limit this to just the village and vote on that. And if people agree with that, then they should vote the second amendment down. And with that, we would most likely come back to this topic about applying to other buildings. And if they still feel that the second amendment should apply, or that the resolution apply to all buildings, then they should vote in favor of this second amendment as offered by Commissioner Peck. Is that everybody else's understanding?
Yeah, I understand that better. That's what I thought I was hearing. And so the first is basically to approve it with that original amendment. And yes, I'm good with that.
Okay, so what we're going to vote on now is the second amendment, which is in red, the first amendment having passed. As I suggested, if you vote this down, then the first amendment will carry over into the full resolution. And if you vote it down, we will come back as we discussed and just have this as a topic in a future meeting. So all of those in favor of the second amendment, that would make this apply to all buildings, raise your hand and say aye. I see only one aye. You'll have to look at everybody else. Oh, Larry, Bridget, and Sharish. So 3 people voting in favor of this. All those opposed, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Missy, are you getting?
I'm going to stop sharing. If you can be so kind, just
Yes.
make sure I get this right.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Aye, Missy.
Hi. Okay, can I just repeat this back, Chair Mirsky, to make sure I got
Yes.
it right? Those supporting are Kerber, McComber, and Smith.
Yes.
Okay, and those against, Mirsky, Colvin, Garcia, Overpeck, Briggs, Radina, Juneau, and Zillman. Did I miss anybody?
Yes.
Okay,
got it. That's it. Yep. Okay.
So motion fails.
I think we need now to vote on the entire resolution. So the resolution, can you put it back up? Is as it will now appear, I believe, in black font everywhere.
Yeah, I just.
Which is that this would be advising City Council and Planning Commission to encourage the Village of Ann Arbor be constructed fully electric appliances, and then as sort of a next resolved that specifically this high SEER rating, which is I looked this up just to confirm it. It's basically this is not something that's unachievable. It's essentially best in class electric heat pumps. So those are the 2 things that we would be advising Planning Commission and City Council to take into consideration. So we've already had a motion to consider the entire resolution and a second, and I'd like to now vote on the entire resolution as amended. All those in favor of the resolution, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. And I would only end with maybe Councilmember Briggs that you and I talk about how we pick up the broader issues and where we get what I would hope would be more than one opinion weighing in on this at the same time, so that we just don't have one person telling the commission's one thing and then have people in another meeting with an opposing a viewpoint, and that we are not able to resolve that in one meeting with hopefully both, ideally, maybe both planning and energy commissions participants.
Yeah, and we can talk about it more. I might recommend, it's sometimes difficult to do a joint commission meeting of both commissions, but I wonder if it might be possible to get, I don't know if Sarah Mills is still the chair of Planning Commission. I think she still is. Having her, she has certainly a lot of expertise in this area as well. Having her come and potentially Kevin McDonald, who's our land use attorney, and talk a little bit about what are some of our limitations, what are some of the things that are being discussed. This group could bring forward some of the things that are being discussed in other communities, and there may be an opportunity to say begin figuring out do we have any tools that we can bring, more tools that we can bring to the table. I know that this is something that nobody is happy about. We just find ourselves in a very challenging place.
Yeah, and I think it also applies to architects and their field in general, and what are best practices in architecture, and what can we learn here in Ann Arbor, and developers that are developing here from potentially developers in other areas, and what are frankly also regional differences too. So great. Mm-hmm. Yep, you and I can talk to Sarah sometime. That'd be great. Okay, this meeting is lasting longer than we had hoped. No surprise, maybe. So the next point on the agenda is a discussion on OSI 2023 activities and opportunities. And Missy, do you want me to introduce the topic? Okay, so this was preceded by some email exchanges with a minority, not everyone on the commission about the A20 plan and some of the actions in the A20 plan, as well as the climate millage. And let me say first and acknowledge, as we discussed, we I think all agreed and laud the fact that the plan is a living plan, that we want to adopt best practices elsewhere, that we want to apply lessons learned, that we want to, as Carlene put it to me the other day, fail forward, and we want to adjust the plan going forward. And there have been a couple of people that have approached me from outside the commission asking why in the plan, if you look at pages, I think it is 10 and 11 of the plan, I could share it later, but I don't know if it's necessary. If you look at the mitigation costs by action in terms of dollars per ton of CO2 emitted, there is a range roughly from under $4 per ton up to $65,000 per ton. So there is a huge range in costs of estimated, and those are granted a couple of years old, estimated costs of what it would cost to be able to mitigate CO2 emissions based on the various activities. And just to put that into context, and I'm sure they were calculated on different bases, but some of you may be familiar with Project Drawdown. And Project Drawdown lists the roughly I think it's 100 top climate solutions. And they also make a similar calculation. And almost all of their costs are in the $100 range, under $1,000. There are one or two that are in the $1,000 range. We have multiple actions that are in the 1,000 up to, as I said, $65,000 range. So there's a concern from that perspective. Also relative to projected cost for carbon capture and sequestration, which is, by the way, something I'll just state flatly I'm not in favor of. But exactly we're seeing comes down. But just, I mean, there are roughly 20 or so facilities operating, and the estimated cost for carbon capture and sequestration ranges significantly depending on how it's applied. But it's anywhere from estimates, and the IEA, International Energy Association, estimates those from anywhere roughly to $25 a ton up to, I think, let's see, $350 a ton. I've seen other, the World Resources Institute estimates direct air capture in the range of $250 to $500 a ton. So if we are implementing actions in Ann Arbor that are costing $3,000 a ton, $5,000 a ton, $65,000 a ton, the question is that a good use of taxpayer money? And secondly, is it something that we should be doing early on in the plan, or is that something that we should be doing later in the plan, given the high cost and given the fact that technologies may be changing? And then lastly, again, this is my perspective, and I want other people to weigh in, that our role is to not advise staff. Our role is to advise council on policy. And it's my view, at least, and I think there's at least a couple of other commissioners that support this, that the best way we can advise on policy going forward is if we have a good understanding of policy as it's being implemented now, and if it's having the desired effect and the desired outcomes. And therefore, with that understanding of current policy, we can make policy recommendations going forward. And again, in my view, the best way of doing that is we have a plan, we execute on the plan, and then we check the plan versus the targets that are set in the plan. And the plan defines, as most of you know, there are assumptions in the plan, there are indicators of success in the plan, and there are timelines and for implementing those actions. And then I think the other thing that we also need to be looking at, which we've discussed from comments from Ken Garber, and that is what are negative, let's say, offsetting impacts, and what do we need to do to address those, and also to essentially what are counter actions to those. So I have a few leading questions, and then I'll open it up for discussion and also for responses from Missy. My first question is, we recently recognized that the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory had not been posted, and that was recently posted. And what I'm wondering, and that was an anomaly because 2020 was the first year of COVID and there were huge changes in people's behaviors. Question that I have is, when will the 2021 inventory be posted so we can see where we stand relative to a somewhat more normal year? And then the question that I'd like to pose for the whole group is, should we be pursuing actions with very high costs, as much as 1,000 times higher than the lower cost, like energy efficiency? Energy efficiency is roughly $4 per ton of CO2 emitted, compared to other things that are in the thousands of dollars range. Should we be pursuing those unless they have really significant co-benefits? And if they don't have significant co-benefits, then should those be pursued outside of the A20 plan and be funded outside this A20 plan? So that's my long but initial lead-in on the topic. And I open it up for others to comment and for then discussion.
John, you can ask Missy to respond first, and then we're going to follow. Is that what we're waiting, kind of pausing for, or?
Anyone can respond or comment in any order.
So my perspective is that Missy and her team have more, even though there's not a prediction for what is going to need funding beyond year one, maybe year two, that there is a sense of like a rationale of why the things are being emphasized now that are more expensive than other things that cost less per empty CO2. That's what I'm assuming. And I think it would be great to hear, like, if I'm not completely off on this, or like, what's like, yeah. So there you go. I'd like to, like, Missy, do you have like a broader like understanding? It's like the reason that we're putting so much more emphasis on these things, that yes, like for the circular economy, it's like, oh my God, this is so complex, but we need to like really get on this immediately right now, because in, we're projecting in 7 years, it's really going to start paying back. And it's the most complicated thing. So we need to put the most resources there now versus putting our resources on energy efficiency. I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of, let me take the first one. John, you asked about the inventory. We're working on 2021. We just have a few data requests that haven't come in. So as soon as we have them, actually, we'll bring it to the Energy Commission. I'll let you know as soon as it's live, because I imagine that's been a recurrence, or our kind of first unveiling of that report. So that'll come as soon as we can get the data.
Is that likely in a month or 3 months, or do we have any idea?
we've been holding on data requests, the last pieces, for a while now. So we could force it and come early and estimate what that data is based on historical trends, or we could hold until we get it. I would hope that we're getting it in the next month, but I can check in with Thea and see. I know she gave me an update when I got back yesterday, that she's almost there. She's just waiting on a few last lingering pieces. So in the works. Carlene, to your question, it is all of those things. So we are working on 38 of the 44 actions in A20, right? And we're working on others that aren't even in A20, like the sustainable energy utility, right? Like that's not in A20, nor was telework in A20, because when we did A20, we didn't actually think we'd have high adoptions of telework, but the pandemic showed that that was really possible. So there's other things that are in play. So the answer is we've got to kind of do it all. And what we prioritize for funding and how we prioritize that funding, that's more of an art than a science. It's where we have interest, where we've got appetite, political appetite, where we have staff capacity, where we've got community willingness to step up, like the ambassadors. When they're ready to run at certain projects, we leverage that to move that work stream forward as fast as we can. And so it's very, very clear in certain areas that we have to be laser focused on energy. We have to be laser focused on electrification, but how that manifests does become more of the art in terms of, I care a lot about heat pumps, right? And the transition of furnaces from heat pumps, but the pandemic showed us the importance of that cooktop, right? From an indoor air quality perspective. And so we pivoted to start working on range replacements, because that was the time and that was the strategic opportunity that we had before us. Whereas when we created the work plan, we thought we were going to focus on furnace replacements. So as an example, it's a little bit of following where we've got momentum and opportunity and making sure we don't lose sight of where we're going though. We have a strategy for full electrification. We're just starting at a different point than I thought we would start in. And that's okay, because we have political and public support for that.
Thoughts from others? Commissioner Juneau.
I think Commissioner McCumber raised their hand first.
Thanks. My question about the A20 plan is, how old is it now? When was it approved? It's 2 years.
2 years old.
I wonder is there any plan for updating it? Because it seems as though these questions about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're prioritizing are going to come up on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering if there's a provision for that.
Yeah. I'll share my philosophical approach to planning, which is it takes a lot of work to update a plan. And we have to make a decision on if it's more important to have the words on the page be accurate, or it's more important to have actions on the ground being implemented with limited staff capacity. So we update it through kind of annual reports. We've had council provide some guidance, and we do have a governance structure for how we can revise the plan. But overall, it's held pretty strong and pretty true as a North Star. So that's a decision we have to make as a community. I am not going to advocate, though, as the director of the office, to update the plan right now, because we are working really hard on implementing actions. So you would be pulling capacity out. We would have to pull capacity to do that. And that's just a decision we have to make if that's the right play.
Commissioner Juneau, did you have something then too? Yes.
Thank you. I guess I would just, I have not seen the numbers that break down the different mitigation strategies at the cost per ton yet. I would be interested to, but I suppose we should add a few clarifications or caveats before comparing them to some of the figures just for CCS or for other drawdown strategies, because these are, of course, costs being borne by the city, yet there may be cost benefits that are being enjoyed by residents that we're not able to necessarily include in those figures. And I think there's also, instances where short-term higher cost strategies may, over the long run, not net out at that same price for other avoided costs in the city down the road from electrification or solar installation, et cetera. So I guess before we too harshly criticize any of the higher end strategies, I'd hope we'd be able to also include those considerations around who's enjoying the benefits and what are the extent of the benefits, and reflect that a little bit as well.
I have a point of clarification, Missy, for my benefit and maybe others. As I understand it, the costs estimated 2 years ago were costs to the city with a small c, not to the city with a large C, meaning the city of Ann Arbor, and that would be hitting the city budget, but that would be a cost to the community at large. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And there's no. It also, correct me if I'm wrong. There's nothing in the plan that calculates a payback or anything like that
for each individual action.
Yeah.
So what we used was a social cost of carbon that we used kind of in the investment portfolio. We do have ROIs on some of the initiatives that are in our financial analysis tool that we did. Some things have ROIs and some things don't have ROIs in a more traditional sense, but in the social cost of carbon, I mean, all of them have a cost of action and a cost of inaction associated with it.
Right. Commissioner Kerber.
So I think this is mostly directed at Missy, and it's more in the form of a concern and maybe asking for some reassurance. Electrification obviously is an important strategy going forward. At the same time, when you electrify something, you're really taking money out of DTE's pocket on the gas side and putting it into the electrical side. And we all have been in meeting after meeting after meeting about how how little progress DT is making and actually greening out the electrical supply. So we're still talking about using fossil fuels, even if we have more efficient electrical appliances, if we have heat pumps and so forth. For the most part, people aren't using their own solar. They're not using green energy. And while we may have great plans for that, in the short term, 10 years, DTE is going to be continuing just to burn more fossil fuels. So I'm just asking just for some clarification on how really, what is the benefit going to be for forcing this electrification at this point in time?
Yeah, it's a good question. And let me take that from a different perspective, which is from the economic case. That what we do a lot of analysis and modeling. What we know is that you can't do strategy 1 or strategy 2 or strategy 3, which are 3 dominant energy strategies. You have to do all of them, right? So you have to do efficiency while you're electrifying in order to pull down the cost. And you have to also install renewable energy. And actually the economics, that's when they start making sense, when you stack those things together for an individual homeowner. And so for us, it's, while I may talk about electrification and join us at the Electrification Expo on Friday at the Farmers Market from 5 to 9 p.m. We look forward to seeing you all there. We always put the peas and carrots of energy efficiency in those conversations as we're talking about electrification, because people are getting excited about electrification and we can't get people as excited about energy efficiency. And so we may say that we're focusing on electrification. Oh, but by the way, we're bringing in that efficiency and we're connecting you to the Solarize program. And so the answer for us is the quagmire of it can't be just one. We've got to figure out how to do it all. And we have to continue pushing to clean our grid. I don't think that's an A20 in any way, shape, or form that's meaningful is the amount of work we do at the Public Service Commission, right? To fight for better regulations, or the work that we're doing in Lansing with our legislators. And so like that's kind of like undertone of all of this work is changing the entire ecosystem in which we operate, so that when maybe one day I can't actually just talk about electrification because it happens to be 100% clean and renewable when you switch. So I don't think I directly answered your question, Larry, other than saying I hear you, that it's complicated, and that is how we're approaching it, is how do we come into the problem from one point, but get solutions that are much more holistic, acknowledging that you as a consumer may be most interested in solar, and that's okay. I'm going to start with solar and I'm going to lead you through the rest of the work that you need to do.
it's almost, in my mind, almost like a top view and a cost view. I mean, what I'm saying is that you can't necessarily save yourself prosperity. What you have to do is to grow, and that grow has to happen from turning fossil fuel generation into renewables. I think that's the primary emphasis. I understand all the strategies have to work together. I guess I would like to see more emphasis on the top line view, how to have more renewable energy, as opposed to the peas and carrots, if you will.
Working really hard on that, Larry. I think you know.
I know you are, absolutely, and support you all in that.
Commissioner Peck.
Yeah, we can't argue with that. I just wanted to highlight, though, that we want to send the right market signals and get our, heating and cooling folks much more focused on electric utilities. And there is a hope that DTE, they're slowly changing. Saw that consumers changed a lot faster. You guys have all been around longer than I have, and I am no fan of DTE's pace here. I think they're the biggest enemy of decarbonization in the state, probably. But nonetheless, I think it's really important for us to be pushing for electrified homes and buildings to the extent we can. And hopefully the power generation will catch up. But we got to act where we can. And I think that's what Missy is saying too.
Anyone else? Missy, I'd like to offer up two, and for our council liaisons, I'd like to offer up two points of consideration. First of all, the millage allocation has $1 million going to solid waste. I probably spend almost as much time on solid waste issues as I do on energy issues, having served on the Energy Commission and being in the Washtenaw Zero Waste Coalition and in a couple of other groups. So my friends there will not probably appreciate my comments, but I question whether we should be spending that much money on solid waste issues in terms of the two major issues, which is year-round composting and commercial recycling, if the estimates are accurate. And those estimates, again, need to be looked at again, but before we actually spend a lot of money sending trucks around to do that versus the opportunity cost of spending the money to do something else. Again, those two costs per ton in the plan are $65,000 per ton. That's 10,000 times higher than many other actions. And then roughly $300 a ton for commercial recycling. I know that Ann Arbor is deeply rooted in recycling. And so I know that this is going to potentially generate a lot of backlash. But what I really want us to do, and this is the thrust of my point, is really have a rigorous process where we're rethinking what we're doing and we're making sure we're doing the right thing. And we're doing sure the right things in the right order. And I'm not sure that we shouldn't be spending, for example, millage funding on a lot of education around zero waste, around circular economy and things like that. But we maybe should be reticent about spending a lot of money on specific kinds of actions like increasing compost and recycling beyond where we're doing it right now, because if it's not really generating a lot of savings in terms of CO2 emissions. The other thing that I would ask that you, this is from me personally, that you try to accelerate as much as possible is the benchmarking or whatever the right ordinances are in terms of like time of market, HERD, whatever the acronym is, HEAD. It's been 3 or 4 different acronyms. That ordinance, as you know, was an 80% ordinance 2.5 years ago. And there may be political issues with realtors, and the same thing with the green rental program with landlords. But these are really two important activities that are going to drive people to look at energy efficiency and electrification. And these are really things that we really need to push people. And I know it's uncomfortable to be questioning and talking about, are we doing the right thing? But I really think those are two things that we really need to focus on and reevaluate going forward. So I don't know the answers. I'm just asking that we sharpen our pencils and relook at those issues in particular. So unless somebody else has something else to say, then we can close out the topic. Councilmember Briggs.
I guess I would just like to affirm, what you're saying. I think it's important that we are very clear about why we're doing what we're doing, and and we're good about communicating. It is certainly something that we hear from residents about, why are we focusing our energy and our resources on certain things, and so we need to be able to explain it very well about why we're pursuing certain things and what the cost benefits are of our activities.
So I'm going to end with one last comment, just so people understand where I'm coming from in my past professional life. I led rigorous review meetings, literally all day meetings, where we would review every single aspect of a plan, implementation of plan. Was it delivering the right outcomes? If not, what can we learn from it? If it was, how can we apply those lessons learned to other things? And I was subjected to those kinds of rigorous reviews, traveling to Germany and sitting in a conference room the entire day, going over every single line item of our plan and whether we were executing in the plan and why not. And a lot of people believe that those are uncomfortable. Actually, those kinds of reviews are absolutely, in my view, absolutely necessary to executing and delivering value to stakeholders, whoever those may be, whether it's, in this case, the city of Ann Arbor residents and property taxpayers, or whether in a company, it's, whoever the various stakeholders are. So that's the perspective that I come from. And I realize that that's not, strictly speaking, our role. But as I said, in order to understand policy and make policy recommendations, we have to understand how well we're doing. And the best way of doing that is having a good understanding is, are we executing and delivering the greenhouse gas reductions that we need to? And if we're not, how can we do that better? So that's where I'm coming from. So that's the bias that I have from 40 years of working in my profession. So thanks for bearing with me. So we are now on the downward slope. We have an election. So Edie, as I mentioned, is going to be, and she told us she's going to be moving to Washington, D.C. She serves as the liaison to the Environmental Commission. And so we want to elect a new representative to the Environmental Commission. And I'm wondering if anybody would like to self-nominate, or whether somebody would like to nominate somebody else for that role. So Environmental Commission, just like this one, meets monthly. It is, Edie, I think, the fourth Thursday of every month. Is that correct? It's at 7 o'clock, and meetings roughly last the same duration based on at least my experience. Is that correct, Edie? Yep, okay. So is anyone interested in serving as liaison?
Just to note, please do not use chat. I have it open and it should not be. So
Okay, so Carlene is just saying that she needs to sign off. She has another commitment that she has to leave for. So actually,
Yes,
she
I
said
do. I
she had to do it
apologize.
at 8 o'clock, so she stuck with us longer than she was supposed to.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, Carlene. So I'm willing, I served as liaison for 3 years. I'm willing to do that again. There's a lot of things that are near and dear to me, but I don't want to take that opportunity away from somebody else if they are interested and see it as a way, if they have passion for things in the Environmental Commission. Is there anybody else that wants to? I didn't see anybody else indicate an interest, so I volunteered.
Does Edie have any words of wisdom or positive experiences to share that might inspire someone to take this on?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to learn about other aspects. I mean, there is a lot of overlap with Energy Commission. Most of the time we had a lot of pertinent things to report back, but I thought it was great to learn more about a lot of things, also depressing things like the bloom in the city, but good stuff too. So enjoyed my time.
So I would encourage somebody else to step forward if they're interested. Edie, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the commission is dealing with natural features, including even things like pollinators. So natural features like wetlands, trees, forests, the river, clean air, clean water, solid waste, and of course, with going back to clean air and clean water, things like PFAS and dioxane plume and things like that. So those are the main issues, but of course, they also have an interest in climate and energy because it has a big impact on the environment. So if there's anybody that's interested in doing that, please step forward. So I'm willing to do it if others agree. Otherwise, we will be unrepresented, and I think that would be a pity if we're not represented. And I don't know, Missy, who's missing? Ember and
Noah, Ember, Moksha, Kendall, and now Carlene.
Yeah, right. I don't know that any of them have expressed an interest in the past when we've had elections. So I mean.
So John, I'd like to nominate you. Thank you for being willing to volunteer.
Yes, I'm willing to volunteer. Do I hear a second? Second from Councilmember Regina. All in favor, say aye and raise your hands. All opposed? Maybe I should oppose. No, I'm fine with doing it. Okay. So Edie, thanks again for your dual service, and again, good luck. So we're down to OSI reports, news for commissioners, and work group updates. So Missy, you want to take the lead from OSI?
Sure. So I'm pretty fresh off of vacation, so you're going to get what's like top of mind for me. Hopefully you all saw the year 2 report that we put out, and I know we talked about it at the last meeting. That's kind of the easiest highlights. Some things just to raise. Per the previous conversation, I wanted to share that we are on a working group to try to establish standards for Scope 3 emissions accounting, which are upstream emissions largely from waste, which right now in A20, the greenhouse gas calculation is what's actually emitted at site. So once it goes to a landfill or is combusted, and we know there are lots of emissions upstream. So we have a team that's on a national working group helping set those standards because we follow very strict reporting protocols for how we capture greenhouse gas emissions. So just wanted to share that I expect we'll have an update to those numbers once we have a methodology that we can all sort of agree on across the country. But just wanted to share that's certainly coming in the future. And then just some highlights. As I said before, Friday night, we have an electrification expo. It's the very first one we've ever done. We have over 30 different vendors that'll be there to talk about all aspects of electrification. Rumor has it the mayor's handing out ice cream. I know that rumor is true. We have popcorn. It'll be just a kind of fun night to come out and learn about electrification, and really excited to get some feedback as we continue to support this work more broadly in the community. Also, in the renewable energy side, we did have a significant end of fiscal year push for projects at the city itself. So we have a contract with Homeland to do installation of solar at our park sites, and that includes rooftops and carports with EV chargers, a pretty significant push. Basically, every park that has a facility, a major facility, not just a gazebo, is getting solar. And then council also approved a PPA with Enerlogics to do solar at a handful of additional sites that are a little bit larger, like our engineering kind of ish sites. If you think about water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. And so combined, that's over 4 megawatts of solar that we'll be breaking ground on here shortly at the city, which is, I'm pretty excited about. It'll be about 20 more EV chargers coming into the system, and we'll have our first carports. So really exciting stuff, at least from where I see, we'll be able to see it, touch it, feel it. And then council also approved in that suite of work our next 2 resilience hubs. So we are working right now on the Bryant Community Center, which is super exciting given all the work in Bryant, and then the Senior Center, which actually is mostly electric anyway. So we're hoping to transition that building to fully electric, have our first 100% carbon neutral building within the city structure. So we continue to chip away at those kinds of things. And as soon as we get those electric garbage trucks, I'll let you know, because we're going to have show and tell when those come out. But they've been ordered. They're back ordered, but we'll have them shortly. There is, I'm confident, a lot more that I'm just kind of missing at the moment. But rest assured, work did not stop while I was away, and we're we're already running. So lots of good stuff happening. Excited to fill you in with a little bit more cogent of a response next month.
Electrification Expo is at the Farmers Market from 5 till 9.
5 to 9. Yeah, that's right.
So you can get dinner. It'll be ice cream, from what I hear then.
And there's food trucks. So
And
you
there's
could get dinner
food
from a food truck.
Right.
And get a heat pump.
Yeah. Any other updates? Council commissioners? Councilmember Briggs.
I think it might be helpful to share if folks may have heard this, but at our last council meeting, we mentioned that moving forward a nomination for Energy Commission, somebody who wouldn't be representing DTE, but was an employee of DTE. Council and the mayor heard pretty strongly from the community some concerns around that appointment. And so we have thanked that individual for volunteering, but the mayor did withdraw, kind of pull back that nomination. So the nominating committee will be meeting again, and I'm sure you'll hear more news, but I definitely always encourage your friends and colleagues to apply, unless they work for DTE.
I just, for those of you that may get questions on this, remember the bylaws, section 5.1, and the bylaws require that anyone that has a conflict of interest, that they recuse themselves from discussion and voting on an issue. And so I think if you talk to people in their asking why we and I speak for myself, and there was a group of us that review applicants and then make recommendations. Those go to the mayor's office, and then he makes the final nominations that go to city council. People need to realize that any employee, and this applies to Larry, and you may recall that Larry has refrained from discussion and voting on some issues where we've talked about things that potentially would have an impact on Homeland, his employer, and the same would apply to anybody else, myself included, or anybody else on commission, that if there is a conflict of interest, you need to declare that conflict, or somebody else can raise it, and then that person would have to refrain from discussion and from voting on the topic. So that's important. That the community understands that we have that provision in our bylaws. Any other updates? Updates. I think Carlene, I don't know if she has anything to talk about with electrification. I'm not aware of anything significant. I know Missy, I think they were working together with former Commissioner Hookham on coming up with some draft framework for street side charging. Do you know anything about that? You've been gone for several weeks, so I don't know that you have anything to mention.
I don't have much.
And I'm not in the details of that anymore either, so I won't even attempt to do that. So with that, then we move on to the last couple of points, public input, items for the next agenda. So think about that, and then we'll adjourn. So for public comment, this is again an opportunity for members of the public to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also displayed on the agenda and the video feed, and Missy will select callers that have raised their hands one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you want to speak, raise your hand electronically by pressing *9 on your phone, and you will hear an automated message that the host is allowing you to speak in the order that people then raise their hands. When speaking, move to a quiet area, and please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller ending in 134.
Thanks, Dr. Stoltz and Chair Mirsky. Ken Garber again. Just a brief comment. Thank you so much for approving the village proposal as amended. Thanks especially to Commissioner Briggs for pointing out that conditional zoning is not allowed. That was my ignorance. But it's still true that Planning Commission has discretion over rezoning petitions. There's other issues with the village. For example, Robertson Brothers is proposing more than 3 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which seems to me very overparked. I'm just an interested member of the public. I don't know how these things get negotiated, if at all. But I did watch while Valhalla Glen and then Lockwood Senior Living originally came in with gas. Both required rezoning, and they both ultimately agreed to go electric in order to gain commission and council approval. I have to believe the city has certain leverage with a rezoning. How does it use that leverage? I have no idea how that works. But I'm pretty sure the city is not helpless in a situation like the village. So thank you again for weighing in on this. It can only help. I'll be at the Planning Commission public hearing next Tuesday. Will my comments and your resolution turn out to be exercises in futility? Maybe. I hope not. We'll know pretty soon. Thank you all again, sincerely, for your great work.
And we thank you for your comments and for enlightening our conversations.
Thanks, Ken. And that's all, Chair Mirsky.
Very good. Okay. Agenda items for the next meeting. Suggestions. Potentially, maybe, fingers crossed, greenhouse gas inventory. Anything else? Missy, Carlene, and I meet a week and 1 day before the meeting to set the agenda, and we have a couple things sort of in our pocket. I'd encourage all of you to reach out to Missy, Carlene, or me if something comes up where you'd like us to consider it, or if you have a speaker or something else. And one thing that we might consider doing is taking on this issue of electric buildings and affordability and things like that, and possibly getting a speaker for that at the next meeting or an upcoming meeting. Any other suggestions? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Sorry, we had hoped to get done by 8 o'clock, but maybe you can blame me for that. So Thanks very much. And it is 8:35, the meeting. I declare the meeting adjourned. Have a great evening. And by the way, one thing. I just have to share this with you. DTE, it was on social media, is buying ice cream for everybody for free at Blank Slate. And so a group of us arranged canvassers. I was there from 2 to 3 today, or 2 to 3:15, 3:30, handing out sheets to everyone that was in line and everyone that was sitting around eating their ice cream cones, and telling them about the other side of what DTE is doing and how they are one of the 50 dirtiest utilities, how they rate a 22 out of 100 in actions to actually execute against their long-term greenhouse gas reduction goals. There's Travis has got the flyer that we handed out. So Travis, did you get your ice cream already? So
no,
if anybody,
someone else sent that to me and said there are people here telling the other side.
I think global warming melted it all.
Yeah, well, that was the image on there. So
also,
Missy,
Washington Dairy has solar and has been doing a whole bunch of energy efficiency work. So
yeah, absolutely. But you might deplete DTE's budget and enjoy an ice cream cone and talk to other people in line and tell them about your work on the Energy Commission and give them another view. So Missy, you should call your family and you should meet them there for an ice cream cone on the way home. So meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening, everybody. See you Friday, hopefully.
Thanks again, Edie.